Sup, Dad?
Welcome to This Dad Reads, a bookish podcast spanning genres and fandoms. I'm your host, Jason, and on today's episode, author Cavan Scott joins me to talk all about his new Star Wars High Republic novel, Path of Vengeance. What's going on, my fandom friends? I hope everyone is doing well out there. Today is a day that I have been looking forward to for quite a while now. I have author Cavan Scott joining me to talk about his latest novel, Path of Vengeance, part of Phase 2 of the High Republic. That's coming up in just a bit, but Path of Vengeance is out everywhere today, and my review is live on thisdadreads.com, so definitely go check that out. It's another 5-star from me to this initiative, to Mr. Scott's writing. It's an awesome book. It is over 500 pages, so plenty of awesome content, and it's just one of those reads that you're not going to want to put down. So more to come with Cavan Scott himself in just a minute, but before we dive into that, I wanted to go over my last current next. So the last book that I read, the last book that I listened to, and I talked about this on my previous episode, and guys, full disclosure, I kind of failed. I didn't read 2 books at once. I thought I was going to be able to start one book reading it physically while listening to another. That just didn't happen. I think it was too lofty of a goal for myself. So the last book I read / listened to was the audiobook of Iron Gold by Pierce Brown, the 4th novel in the Red Rising series. It's part of my reread that I've been doing since January, and so I have Dark Age, the 5th book that is currently out up on the agenda for May, and I am stoked for Lightbringer coming out in July. So it's all happening. Iron Gold is definitely a pivot in terms of tone and story for this series, and it was actually my 3rd time engaging with it, and I think I've loved it more every time I've read it. I do that thing where I first read a book that I'm really wanting to read, and I just devour it so fast that a lot of the details or like maybe the subtlety or the nuance of the text kind of goes past me and I miss it. But the first time I reread this book, I read it physically, and then this 3rd time I did the audio drama. So I feel like I have the whole experience now, and just appreciate what Pierce Brown did with this story, these characters. And obviously I won't speak to too many spoilers, but to the other Red Rising fans out there who are listening, just the Ephraim and Lyria relationship to me is just so good. I mean, it's heartbreaking and dark and deep, and it's so good. There's so much depth with Pierce's characters. So anyway, that was the last book I read. Loved it. Can't wait to dive into Dark Age. And so that's coming up next month. The book I'm currently reading was the book I said I was going to read concurrently, but I'm diving in now. It's The Endless Vessel by Charles Soule. And I'm about a little more than halfway through at this point, and I'm really enjoying it. I didn't really know what to expect. I was going to it pretty blind. So this book comes out in June, and it's about, it's set in the current day, but basically there's an affliction going on globally called the Gray that is kind of like a depression it's like a depression / pandemic, kind of like basically people can get affected by it and they can control it, but it's kind of like this darkness and this grayness that once you have it, you can't get rid of it. You can maybe manage your symptoms, and there's different versions of it that you can have, and one version of it is this kind of like extreme joy where you kind of just like you find a weird pleasure in just the bleakness of life. And so it's this people's goal to get as many people afflicted with the Gray as possible. And so there's this woman in the UK who stumbles across a device that potentially can have world-saving powers, and it's kind of like an Alice in Wonderland. She goes down the rabbit hole of discovery. She's figuring out stuff from her past, from her family, and it's a wild ride so far. It's very like genre defying in my opinion. And so it's fun. It's a crazy ride. And so I'm in the middle of that right now. I will have my official review of that up in May sometime. And I'm hoping I can actually speak to author Charles Soule on the podcast about this very book in the future. And the next book I'm reading is called Lethal Connections, The Poison ID Unit by authors Eric Daniel Shine, Melissa Davis, and Karen Fuller. I'm going to read the back of this book because I know as little about this book as you guys do, so let's dive in together and see what to expect. It says, in a sleepy little parish just outside of New Orleans, murder is no rare occurrence. Sergeant Lance Knight has a pile of unsolved homicide cases on his desk. On the surface, none seem to be connected. The victims are all men with money or power. An investment banker, a lawyer, and a local politician. They don't socially run in the same circles, and Lance can't find a connection. Working closely with coroner Gina Goodwin, Lance and Gina discover a pattern. 3 unrelated things that bodies all have in common, a string of lethal connections. Is it just a coincidence, or is it something more? So it's a thriller. It looks like it's going to be a fun time. I don't know what to expect, so more to come on that book as well. All right, where's my guy, Casey? Casey, come on in here. Hey, how's it going, bud? Are you excited? We've been looking forward to this for a long time, right? Awesome. Yeah, so you're going to kind of meet your maker, as it were. Not in the bad sense. That sounded weird, but... Thanks so much, Casey. So my next guest is no stranger to those in the Star Wars book community. He is the author of The Rising Storm. He writes comics. He writes middle grade novels, and his latest novel, Path of Vengeance, the YA novel from the High Republic, is out today. So I would love, Casey, will you help me give a warm welcome to our guest, Cavan Scott?
Hello there.
How's it going?
It's going well. It's a very rainy afternoon in Britain here in the minute. So if you can hear waterworks in the background, that's what's happening. But yeah, it's all good.
I'm jealous. It's like 90 degrees where I live right now. So.
Oh, there we go. See, but that sounds wonderful. So I think what we basically need to do is, the grass is always greener. I'll come over to you, you come over to me. And
it's the truth. I used to work in retail, and I would have people who would come through who moved to the States. I'm in California from the UK, and I would be like, I would love to live. Like, can we trade? It is that exact same thing. I would tell them how much I wanted to go to a rainy, dark place, and they said they move here because they want sun and hot. And I was like, well, no, it's just, you never know. It's always, the grass is always greener. You're right.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, thank you so much for taking time and joining today. And first off, I have to say happy release to Path of Vengeance.
Thank you.
Path of Vengeance is out in the world. How does it feel? Does it feel different every time, or does it, I'm sure you don't get bored of the feeling, right, of having a new book out in the world?
No, it does feel different every time. I think this one as well, every book has, you bring with it what was going on at the time you were writing. And so, it always seems a bit of time travel that suddenly, this thing's out. It's slightly weird with this one because it was a surprise to me, but we had copies on sale at Star Wars Celebration, and I only realized that when they were put in front of me by people to sign. And so that was a shock. It was the first time I'd seen it. So, that was a slightly different way of doing it than usual. You usually get a box and you get that moment to sort of take the book out, and it's a beast. This one, it's big and long and heavy, and you could do serious damage with it.
And you did.
But yeah, so that made it slightly different, and I think it is wrapped up in Celebration now as well, because people were buying it on the first day and then coming to sign-ins on the second day with the pages marked, because they've been reading them in line and stuff, and already annotating them. And I mean, that's always both awe-inspiring and humbling that people spend that much time poring over them. So yeah, I try to make sure that it feels special, because when you work on something like the High Republic, when there's been such a turnover of story, you have to have those moments when you go, oh no, we've done something else. We've put another story out there, because it can become too much like, oh, here it is, brilliant, right. Meanwhile, I'm writing this. So it's that thing of marking the milestones. And so, yeah, I think it's important for any writer whenever, you see the product for the final time, you see the book or the comic or whatever, that you do spend time to sit and flick through it and look through it and realize and remember what it was like to put it together.
Sure, I'm sure that's a weird feeling, knowing that you're living in this creative space somewhere else where no one else is living, and they're all living in the past. Like you said, it's time travel, so it's like that must be a real brain, hard thing to do for your brain sometimes.
It is, but I do. The joy of this project is that I live there with at least 10 other people. So at the minute, all the High Republic authors, or the Lumineers, as people keep calling us, and I'm still find hilarious. We're living in phase 3,
right?
And so and some of us further into phase 3 than others, and so yeah, you have to remember where you are, and even answering questions, I have to suddenly, someone asked me, I was answering a question earlier on about Elzo Man, and I had to remember where I was when I'm answering it, because for me, Elzo Man has moved on a bit to when we last saw him. So you always have to have that at the back of your mind of trying to sort of check in and go, where am I?
Yeah.
What can I say? And Mike Seglain's answer, if you say nothing, that's the head of publishing.
I bet.
Lucasfilm Disney. And he watches us like hawks. Even when he's not here, it's scary. You're constantly trying to work out where you are this is a very different project to a lot of things that you do in both Star Wars and beyond. So it's so all encompassing, it's so intense and expansive that there is just a lot of moving parts at any one time.
Oh, I bet. I have a little guy who's kind of poking me over here on this side, and I didn't mean that to sound weird, but KC78 just wanted.
But it did.
KC78 wanted to say hi. You want to come say hey, Casey? Yeah, this is you know this guy, right? You know Cavan. You want to say hi?
Yeah, I've had a hand in his life, I think.
Yeah, I kind of resurrected / stole him just from, he made his way to me. So I'm happy to have my little helper buddy droid, and he was really excited that you were going to come on. So
it's good to see him again.
Definitely. So the fandom was definitely wrecked, and I think shocked by Path of Deceit that came out last year, the first YA novel in phase 2. So did seeing the response from fans, obviously you probably had your own response to that book as just reading it, talking to, Justina and Tessa, but did that kind of excite you? What did that do to your response as the author of of its sequel, essentially?
I think there's many answers to this question. One of the answers is that there was a sense of relief because we were taking a massive risk in this phase. So for people who don't know, High Republic is this ongoing initiative from Lucasfilm Publishing, and we had the first phase was set in one particular point, and being very George Lucas about it, we moved back 150 years for the second phase. And no one knew if anyone would come with us, especially as we were leaving the characters that people are grown to love on a cliffhanger, and very purposely leaving them on a cliffhanger, and introducing a whole host of new characters. And it had been very Jedi-led as well. And through Path of Deceit, we were introducing a story that it was probably one of the first largely non-Jedi story within the High Republic. I mean, there have been others, obviously, from Nan and Lorna and various others as well. But even though the Jedi played a part in Path of Deceit, it was very much not their story. So the response was gratifying, to say the least, because it proved. I mean, we sort of got an inkling at Celebration last year when we had the panel, which we've all talked about loads because it's still a major moment for us, I think, when we realised how many people were in that room. And the response to the Phase 2 reveals at that. Because then, again, that's the crazy thing about it. Things are moving so quickly. That was only last year's Celebration, and we were revealing pictures of Marder and everything for the first time.
It hasn't even been a year.
At that point, no, exactly. It's crazy. It's just, it's mad. And no one knew, I think at that point that I was writing Vengeance. And so it was gratifying. But it's always daunting to follow someone's footsteps, especially when you're following writers as skilled as Justina and Tessa. And they created such a unique world, and we'd obviously talked about it, and unique characters that you do have a sense of... there's a responsibility. You're taking on characters. And I knew when I was reading Path of Deceit where the characters were going. And I knew their ultimate end, as some people who've already read the book now know. But yeah, so you're constantly going, okay, I need to live up to this now. And then there was the added thing of the Rising Storm went down so well. So incredibly well. I never, and that's not a humble boast. That's just the gratitude, because I didn't think it would go down as well as it did. So not only have I got to live up to Path of Deceit, I've got to live up to the Rising Storm, and you're only ever as good as your last book.
Sure.
And so there was a lot riding on this one. And yeah, it's still there a bit. As I say, some people have read it, some reviews are coming in. But from today, that's it. It's out of my hands completely. And it's been out of my hands for a while now, but the point where a book's released yeah, that's when you realize that, there's nothing you could do now, and it's up to the readers now. It's the reader's book. It's not yours.
Thankfully, having been one of the ones that was able to read it early, not as early as Celebration, couldn't attend this year, unfortunately. I was stoked to have been there last year. That's when we first met. I hounded you outside, and I was like, Cavan, get over here. And, had the pleasure of interviewing you and just being able to chat a couple of times and being one of the people in that room and just getting ready for the fervor. I remember that was one of the questions I asked you about, we're stoked to have a YA from you. I just remember the excitement. I'm mainly, fan. Obviously, I do reviews and stuff like that, but I'm mainly just I'm just a fan like everybody else. So I'm stoked to have been one of those people, and knowing it's even for me having it's so hard. I'm sure it's not as hard as your job, but just not being able to say as much, like writing a spoiler-free review, especially for something like this, and for people who aren't maybe caught up all the way. So it's the fandom is just so ready for it, and I don't even think people are even that ready for it. So it's an exciting thing. So
excellent, thank you.
Definitely. So out of some of those characters, you mentioned Marta. She very quickly became a fan favorite, especially for me. I really loved her for her complicated nature. She's kind of good, bad, beautiful. She's all these things mixed up. So what was your experience writing such a complex character as Marta?
Marta goes on a journey in this book, it's fair to say. And it was a journey that was built in, like all of these things in the High Republic. We've discussed these stories at great length and these characters and their arcs. But Marta is a complicated character to write. I think I enjoyed writing her cousin Yana more, just because, not because of the character, just because I think I could identify more with Yana. Okay. Marta is a character who becomes, without giving any spoilers, she becomes quite radicalized by her past, and also, let's face it, she's a member of a cult. And I think that's we start to see in Path of Vengeance how quickly the tide turns for this group of people. And Marta is in the middle of it. She's fascinating to write because she is so conflicted through the entire thing, and she does feel lost, both when you're writing her and hopefully as the character in the book. And she comes out. I'm very much of the mind that you have to let characters see, things through to their the ultimate end. And as I said, and then you're going to have those moments when you're going to shout and yell at the book because there isn't always a happy ending, because that's life. Not everyone makes the right choice. And people have talked to me about Tempest Runner, which was the audio drama I did about Lorna D, who's another very complicated character as well. And people have said, I don't want to give too many spoilers, and heard it, that they spent most of the time yelling at her because there's a redemption arc she refuses to take throughout that entire thing. And again, that was important, and we had conversations about that, because people were saying, well, she's ending up worse than she was at the beginning. I was like, that's Lorna's choice, and that's what she does, and people do that. And while Marta is a very different character, hopefully the decisions she makes, even though people might not agree with them all, they can see where they come from.
Definitely. And I even think amidst her choices, it's just so unique that she's so attractive as a character. I don't know, I just want whatever she does, whatever she decides, there's just something about her that makes me care so much. It's really unique. It's really cool. You mentioned,
I think, because there's certain stories in certain films when even though you've watched them or read them dozens of times, you're still hoping that you won't get the ending is coming. And I think that was, even when I was writing this, I knew where Marta would end up, and I didn't necessarily want her to get there. But you know, you can't help it. A character has their path. So
I'm not allowed to ask the questions I want to ask after you gave me that answer, so we'll just leave those for the future. You mentioned the cult aspect, and the Path of the Open Hand has been a huge part of this phase, and honestly, it's been so interesting, and they've been one of my favorite parts of every single story aspect. This is kind of spiritual territory. I know the Force has like spiritual aspects to it, but I feel like, as a canon and as a story, that's something that really the spiritual aspect hasn't been leaned into a ton. I'm just curious if you can give me any insights on how this like specific type of story and this specific part of like humanity, like the story team, how did that decision get made to focus on that?
I think it's, as you said, the Force is described as a religion. The Jedi are described as a religion in various stories, and it's never really explored. I mean, they are a faith. And so we wanted that to be a huge part of the High Republic. And one of the things we kept referring to, obviously the Jedi as a group were influenced heavily by Eastern religions, from George. We kept thinking for this period of time of Arthurian legends, and linked to that the Crusades, and I kept looking at the Templar Knights of how that might influence now. So I've got a theology degree, and one of the things I looked into a lot was the Templars when I was studying, and I find them fascinating because obviously there are 1,000 horror films where they're the bad guys and they're worshipping Satan, and when you actually look at what little evidence we've got, the Templars are far more complicated than that, and they were persecuted by the victors of certain battles that went on within the church. And again, when you're looking at the Jedi Knights within the entire story, within the entire saga, again, they're largely an old religion that's been largely wiped out and has been treated badly by some people and venerated by others. And so for me personally, the High Republic is always a chance to treat them as people. And just as when you look back and you find rare cases of evidence of what really happened in Templar Knight temples, you start to realize why those legends have come to fruition. And so for me, it's that's been part of it. And again, it was a chance. We haven't had a chance in current canon to really look at the Force as a melting pot of religions. And so this was a chance. And when we looked at Jeddah as a possible location for a vast majority of Phase 2, we looked at Pablo's incredible visual dictionary from Rogue One. And of course, he starts to go into some of those religious organizations that we see the remnants of in Rogue One. So again, it was a chance for us to go back. And I'm genuinely fascinated by faith and religion. I don't think it's something I particularly have of my own anymore, and I do of it quite academically. But I'm always fascinated about why people believe and what that belief does to them.
Yeah, and I think that was just, to me, at least a pleasant surprise, and it just added this depth to the storytelling. It was really interesting and cool. So this is a more broad question, but I guess what did you enjoy the most about all the storytelling happening in Phase 2? We just talked about the spiritual aspect, but what other parts of kind of this separate, specific timeline brought you joy?
I mean, it was from a story point of view, it was a chance to expand the world of Jedi and to bring in characters who weren't Jedi. And I'd spent a lot of time writing Jedi in the first phase, so I was ready to drop the lightsabers, even though a lot of my non-Jedi seem to have lightsabers as well. But that's another story. But I think from taking a step back, I think Phase 2 is important to me because of the wider aspect of bringing in the other writers. So obviously Phase 1 and the entire plan has been the work of myself and the other 4 story architects. But with this phase, we brought in other people from purely practical reasons as well. We couldn't write everything, and we needed other voices. So most of those voices I knew before. A couple, actually, it was only really Lydia I think I met through the High Republic. But it's been a joy to welcome them into the family and get a new sense of new senses of storytelling, new ideas, different ways of working. Obviously, one of them is George, who's one of my oldest friends. So we've worked together loads. So it was great to work together on this. And because George wrote the Battle of Jeddah audio drama, I was writing the comic set on Jeddah. There's elements from the Path of Vengeance that lead literally straight from the Battle of Jeddah. They share a couple of scenes. So George and I could really work well together on that because we we've done that before, and it also gave us a chance to hang out. So, I mean, part of this, I think Charles said it at the celebration panel this year. For us, the people on the stage there, the people who couldn't get across this year, that team has really been the joy of it for us, because it's so wrapped up in what we're doing, and the storytelling we're taking part in. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest joy for me.
That's great. That's great. I have to say, for someone who wasn't at Celebration, I said this in one of my other episodes, I felt like I was there. Like, those are my people. Like, all those cosplayers who looked so awesome, and seeing, I wasn't jealous. I was like, it was still felt like, I was like, those are my people. Like, it felt like I was there. It was awesome. I was so happy just to see the joy and all the people who got to experience it. So
we were stunned by that entire thing. And so, yeah, and I think I read about it on my newsletter, but there was a moment where we were sort of taken outside the convention center for the meetup, and there was like a handful of people, and we were like, oh, okay, that's cool. And they went, oh, no, we're not the meetup. And then they pointed it. It was like a proper, like, comic turn
reveal,
the page,
yeah.
or, moment, reveal. Yeah. That's the meetup. And there was just this gaggle of people at the bottom of the stairs. And we were all stunned. I'm interviewed on the live feed at one point by Christina, and I can't remember the interview. I can't remember the interview at all, because I was so giddy.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was overwhelming, and there was just, it's so rare to have that moment where, even when you do sign-ins and you're with people, you're not with people, you're behind a table or whatever, and you've got to get the line moving, and you have people from the store going, keep going, keep going, keep going. So to be in a moment where we could just be amongst people who had spent so much time creating these most beautiful costumes. I mean, stunning work. Spending more time in many cases with our characters than we spent, because they've put hours into building these amazing costumes and crafting them. That was a real treat, and a blessing that you don't usually get. And so I think that's going to be a memory for a long, long time.
I don't mean to bring this back to me at all, but last year, the meetup at the first Celebration 2022, that was my favorite part, was the meetup, was just being with the people and chatting. Yeah. It's the best. So, and that's what I'm going to miss the most.
Yeah, we thought that couldn't be topped. We were like, nothing's ever going to top that. And it's not a top in the sense of, I mean, they're both there, because again, it's just sort of seeing the growth of it, and it's seeing the development. Yeah. And in some ways, that first one will be always important, because again, that was one of the moments we realized that this is landed.
Yeah.
This is having an impact on people. And then to see it build onto this year's was incredible.
So cool. And I've noticed online and just the spaces that I'm in, that more people are coming, and I'm just like, open arms, come, like, read these books, like, love these characters like we do. Like, it's so cool. I can't tell you how many new Reddit threads there always are about, like, where do I start? So we're just like happily letting
the eternal question.
Yes,
where do I start reading this stuff?
You guys made it relatively easy, so it's always a pretty easy answer, basically. But did your approach to writing Path of Vengeance change at all, or your method, in the fact that it was like a YA novel? Does that have an effect on you as a writer? Like, what does that mean to you?
Story is story, no matter what the medium. And of course I do write across a varied spectrum of media, which is a real joy in itself. That I have that opportunity. So when I first approach comics, it's no different to, say, putting together a story for a novel. And likewise, when I'm moving from sort of novels to audio, and now TV and film as well. But I suppose the change comes when it's the lens you're looking through, and you have to bear in mind, there's a responsibility to bear in mind the audience. And now I've written horror, for example, for kids. I've written the Warhammer universe for like middle grade, and it's still got to be recognised to be Warhammer, and it's still got to be recognised to be for 9-year-olds. And so there's a responsibility, and it's the same with Path of Vengeance. When you're dealing with the subject matter, you've got to think about how it's going to impact the final reader. So there's obviously sophistication between certain levels of reader, and I'm a true believer that every level of fiction has to be sophisticated, and you have to treat the final reader or viewer with respect. But you do have to be responsible and think about how that will come across to someone of that age. And so there would have been choices I would have made if it was a straight adult book that wouldn't have been right to put into a book that, that largely is going to be read by, people at a very, formative part of their life, when they're moving. I mean, literally young adult, they're moving into adult. And it's been a while now since I've been there. But, you know what you were going through at that time as well. So I think that's the only real difference. The central plot can be the same. It's how you put that across and the choices you make and what to show, the choices you make in how the characters respond. It's all down to responsibility. Really.
Perfect. So there are a number of connections. I'm trying to tread lightly here. A number of connections, and I would say puzzle pieces that click into place in Path of Vengeance that for people who pay attention, and a lot of, Star Wars readers pay attention, are going to be very satisfied by, but I think also left kind of still wondering, like, I guess my question is, are you that kind of lore puzzle master person, or does it, I mean, obviously you said story always comes first, but how do those kind of clicking in pieces, how does that work? Is that something that you have to include and so you have to wrap it in, or is it something you enjoy doing?
I think it's the way my brain works, and I think it comes from being a fan of things like Star Wars and Doctor Who and James Bond and all those things that actually, I mean, we've all know, actually it's a lot to do in a Doctor Who fan because Doctor Who has no canon really at all in any way. And if it does, it will change next week. And so as a fan, you spend a lot of time trying to work out how that works. And it's the same with comics and everything. And for me, that's always the fun bit. And so I get the chance to do that professionally, which is great. And one of the joys of working on a project like this, and the one thing I hopefully bring to it, and I know other people have commented about, is that I do like solving problems. And so I do like saying, oh, well, that's an issue, but hang on, we did that over there. If we pull that over here and we just twist it a little bit and we do this, it'll work. And so it is how my brain works. I know because of this, Mike Seglain has lent on me to do certain things. So, there was a long list of things that this book had to do while also trying to be a good book, which hopefully succeeded. And I think it's having a light touch. So yes, there are a lot of Easter eggs in there for people who've been reading everything else. Hopefully it doesn't trip too many people up if they haven't. One of the things recently is that I've watched Picard with just across the Star streams. I've watched Picard with my wife recently. Now, my wife is not a Star Trek fan in any way whatsoever. Loves Picard. Never really watched Star Trek. Knew generally, because she lives with me, who the characters were, but never really watched an episode. And I think before Picard Series 1, I showed her Best of Both Worlds. And that was her experience of Next Generation. Completely passed her by. And has watched this latest series of Picard, which is incredibly continuity heavy, but at the same time incredibly continuity light, because everything's explained in the show. And so I remember saying to her at one point, do you need me to run through what the Dominion War was? And she said, from what I can gather, it was a war. It was called the Dominion War between the Federation and people who could change their shape. Oh yeah, that's pretty much it. So she didn't need to know about the battle. She didn't need to know about the episodes of DS9. And that's what I'm always trying to do in these books, and reward people who, Simon Sura, the writer, who obviously wrote Afra originally, he said about, an Easter egg should be a treat. It shouldn't be a treat to find, not something to beat someone over the head with. And that's been built into Star Wars from the very beginning. So, yeah, hopefully there's no beating over heads going on. But, it is a delicate balance sometimes to do. And especially with something like Path of Vengeance, which had so many things to lead in from, and was also had to set out certain things for the end of Phase 2 and beyond as well. So, yeah, there was a lot of moving parts to bear in mind with what I was doing.
Definitely. Well, I loved it. I couldn't put it down. Cavan, that to me, the litmus test of a book, if I know I'm going to love it, is if I don't want to stop. And I at all costs, sleep, whatever. I don't want to stop reading it.
You need to sleep. Sleep is important.
It is important, especially for, tired dads like me out there. But I loved it. My review is out now, and I gave it 5 stars. Like it's awesome. It's amazing. So congratulations.
Thank you.
It's an awesome accomplishment, and again, it was everything I was hoping it would be, and I think everyone's going to love it. So I also want to just give a quick shout out to Corey Brickley, the artist who worked on the cover art. I know that, the Path of Deceit cover was just gorgeous, and all of us, the fans, were stunned when the cover for Path of Vengeance came out. Was that your response as well? Did you get any pre-look at that before it kind of hit?
For that one, I got a look beforehand. What Mr. Seglain usually does with me is show me covers in panels.
Okay.
So I think all the covers up to recently of all the Vader's Castle series, I've seen with everyone else in a panel. Mike refuses to let me see them, and
nice.
run-throughs for panels, because quite often we go through the panel beforehand. He will remove
from
them
the slides.
From the
Oh
so
no!
I can't see them. Yeah. So the reaction you get from me is the reaction
of the room.
That's true. Yeah, and so you have to sit there and develop a poker face, because if I didn't like something, that'd be awful. But that's not happened yet.
Oh, good.
But at least with Path, there was I don't think I'd seen the symbol that's on the cover on the version I'd seen. So I think that cover came in, and that I think it was always there, but I don't think I'd really noticed it before. It wasn't so prominent. So it was only really when I saw it on the big screen in the panel that I went, "Oh God, no! It really is there, isn't it?" And I think in the panel you can hear Justina say, "What's that on the floor, Cav?" And so yeah, it was that work. But yeah, it's incredible work. Both those books are beautiful. I mean, it's just from the color scheme and everything. It's we did have a lot of conversation over that cover as well. So, but yeah, they're beautiful work.
Gorgeous,
absolutely stunning.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to say it here. This episode is coming out on the Path of Vengeance release date. I'm excited. Mm-hmm. You are going to be joining Fabio and myself of Tatooine Times on Instagram Live on May the 4th, right? Mm-hmm. So
that's right, yeah.
So happy to have you on there. But that is going to be at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and 8 p.m. GMT, I think. So
that's right.
Check out.
That's what we hope.
Check out our socials. Kevin's going to be jumping on. We're really excited about that. Excited to just kind of hang out and chat on our favorite holiday. Let's just say it. May the 4th. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for being here, Cavan. It's been an awesome pleasure and joy to chat with you. Hopefully we can do it again in the future.
Good news.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to once again give Cavan Scott a huge thanks for joining me and talking about Path of Vengeance. The book is amazing, you guys, and I know not everyone is caught up currently on the phase, but definitely pick this book up, add it to your collection. It does so many cool things story-wise and brings back some much-beloved characters like Marta that we talked about and Yana Rowe, so it is definitely not one to miss. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, or me and Cavan talked about it, but this Thursday, May 4th, 2023, obviously is a day that all my Star Wars friends know about, is the May the 4th day. I am excited because Cavan is going to be joining myself and Fabio of Tatooine Times for an Instagram Live, which is taking place at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So figure out whatever time zone that means for you out there in the world. But we are going to have an awesome time chatting all things Star Wars. We'll have some fun giveaways planned, so it's going to be a good time. That's it for this week's episode. Thanks again to my guest, Cavan Scott, for joining me, and I will catch you guys next time. Take us out, Casey. Thank you so much for listening. For more of my content, visit my website at thisdadreads.com for full book reviews, interviews, and articles. Follow me on socials at thisdadreads on Twitter and Instagram. This Dad Reads, the podcast, is produced by Aravis Industries and me. Special thanks to my editor, Jeremy Tuttle, and to Coma-Media for the use of their song Bounce. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and leave me a 5-star review. It really helps. Catch you next time.